Today, we're going to explore the birth of Jesus. What does this ancient story reveal about our own choices, our fears, our expectations, and our relationship with God? Far from being just an event of the past, this story continues to shed light on the human experience. Subscribe now to make sure you don't miss our next episode. Welcome to New Pod. The story of Jesus' birth, as found in the Gospels of Matthew, chapter 1, and Luke, chapter 2, isn't just a simple historical record. It speaks to questions that are a timeless part of the human experience. How do we react when faced with the unexpected, with uncertainty? What do we base our decisions on when everything seems to be falling apart? This biblical story invites us to look beyond the facts and see a universal experience, one of waiting, vulnerability, hope, and transformation. It encourages us to see how, in the middle of ordinary situations, extraordinary events can happen, making us reflect on our own lives and our journey of faith. Our goal here is to bring this story to life, to shed light on its human and spiritual aspects, and to show how it can still resonate with us today, offering valuable keys to understanding our own relationship with God and how He works in the world. To fully grasp the significance of Jesus' birth, it's essential to place ourselves in the context of the stories from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. These passages introduce us to a world where ancient promises, made by God to His people and foretold for generations, are about to be fulfilled in an unexpected way. The main characters are Joseph and Mary, simple and humble people, rooted in the Jewish tradition of their time. Mary, a young woman engaged to Joseph, finds herself in a surprising and unsettling situation, a pregnancy that defies all human and social explanation. Joseph, a righteous man who respects the law, faces a deep dilemma, torn between the demands of tradition and his own compassion. The initial tension is tangible. How will these ordinary lives respond to the extraordinary call they've received? And how will this move forward the great story of salvation for all humanity? The story of Jesus' birth unfolds as a vivid tale. Its details highlight the fragility and humility of this pivotal event. It begins with Joseph and Mary traveling from Nazareth to Bethlehem. They were forced to make the journey by a census ordered by Emperor Augustus. This official requirement put them in a vulnerable position. They were far from home, just as Mary was about to give birth. Then they faced a major obstacle. There was no room for them at the inn, or even in any private homes. Imagine their distress, desperately searching for shelter in a crowded town. This search highlights their difficult situation, but it also shows God's quiet providence, at work even in the most precarious circumstances. The contrast is striking, the anticipation of such a monumental event, set against the reality of a birth in the simplest of settings. It invites us to reflect on the unexpected ways God chooses to reveal Himself to us. And so it was in a stable, a place for animals, a makeshift shelter, that Mary gave birth to her firstborn son. She tenderly wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, his very first cradle. This turning point in the story is marked by deep humility and a complete lack of ceremony. The Lord of the universe came into the world in the simplest way possible, without any of the earthly honors one might expect for a king. The story's impact is immediate and significant. In the nearby fields, shepherds watching their flocks were the first to hear the news from a joyous heavenly message. They hurried to Bethlehem and found the child, just as they had been told. The contrasts between faith and fear, God's faithfulness and human fragility, the awaited prophecies and their quiet fulfillment, all resonate throughout the story. This gift from God to humanity is revealed in the vulnerability of a newborn, offering a path of light in the darkness of the world and of our own lives. The turning point of this story isn't just the physical birth of the child. It's the divine intervention that gives the event its true meaning. So, what was at stake for Mary and Joseph? Mary faced social judgment. Joseph could have been forced to break off their engagement. Both of them risked being completely misunderstood. But beyond these fears, they discovered a powerful truth about God and about themselves. They learned that the Lord is faithful to His promises and that He chooses unexpected ways to fulfill them. The change that followed was immense. The Incarnation, God becoming man, ushered in a new era for all of humanity. The consequences of this birth reached far beyond the personal story of Mary and Joseph. They touched all of humankind, offering a path to reconciliation, forgiveness, and hope. This seemingly small event was actually the turning point in the story of salvation. It revealed the power of God's love, made manifest in the vulnerability of a newborn baby. The birth of Jesus shows us how God draws near to humanity. He doesn't come with the power and glory that some expected, but in the humility and vulnerability of a newborn. He calls specific people, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, and begins something new, often in a quiet way that is almost invisible to the world. On the human level, we see the fear of Mary and Joseph, their courage to accept the unexpected, and the transformation they experienced through this divine call. On the spiritual level, the story reveals God's constant presence, his call to trust, and his infinite mercy, which is shown by him becoming one of us. On the biblical level, this birth fulfills ancient prophecies. It continues the story of salvation that began generations ago and paves the way for a new future for humanity. This account invites us not to oversimplify the complexity of God's work, but to recognize his presence even in the tense and uncertain areas of our lives. This timeless story of the birth of Jesus invites us to recognize the calls, the new paths, and the new beginnings that God can bring about in our ordinary lives. This story speaks to us when we face uncertainty, a situation that demands a courageous decision, or an unexpected change. The story of Mary and Joseph shows us that God is at work in our simplest and sometimes most complex realities. It encourages us not to fear the unknown, but to trust in his guidance and providence. We are invited to read this biblical story for ourselves, to be inspired by the faith of these figures, and to identify what in our own lives requires a decision or an act of trust. Sometimes, a simple act, performed in faith and obedience, can open the door to a new chapter in our walk with the Lord, reminding us that his work is always unfolding for our good. In conclusion, the birth of Jesus reminds us that amidst human decisions, frailties, and turmoil, a larger story continues to unfold, the story of God's unconditional love for humanity. This narrative is not a distant fairy tale. It's an invitation to recognize God's hand in our own lives, to accept the humility of his ways and the greatness of his plan. It teaches us that the most significant events can spring from the humblest of circumstances, changing the world from within and renewing our hearts. We hope this meditation has offered you clarity and encouragement on your own journey of faith. In our next episode, we'll continue our exploration of Jesus' childhood stories, uncovering more about this foundational account and what it means for us today. The story of Jesus' birth still speaks to us today, inviting us to find trust and hope. Be sure to subscribe to New Pod so you won't miss any of our future episodes.